Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Carlos Huereca, Corporate Relocations International CHRO, and I am thrilled today to be here with Donovan Mattole, Vice President of Human Resources at Brenntag in the Americas. Donovan, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, and I'm so excited to have this conversation. We could have easily turned this around, and I could be interviewing you. So I really enjoyed your recent cover article. So it's great to meet you.
Great meeting you, and feel free to put me on the spot. I don't mind that at all.
Okay, okay, that's good. I have plenty of questions for you, so we'll probably do that.
That's great. I also want to take a moment to thank the American Healthcare Leader for hosting this interview. All right, let's jump right in. Donovan, your career is full of interesting twists and turns, and I was hoping we could talk about what eventually helped lead you to the right path for you.
That's good. That's a great question. And there's probably more twists and turns than you even are aware of, right? That's how it always is. I think the through pit for me on this kind of like serpentine labyrinth path has been people. I've always loved working with people. So, you know, back in the day, I wanted to be a professor of Middle Eastern studies. So, but it was all about kind of connecting with people and things I enjoyed. And I ended up working in a bookstore out of graduate school. Borders Books and Music, and I just loved books and loved people and was a retail manager and managing people and ended up in training, and I was a training store manager, so I'd train all the new managers would come to my store, and I would spend time with them and kind of show them what it means to kind of drive the store and performance. And I moved into HR at Borders, and the reason was all about training and development. And I was like, I can do this for a career versus go be a professor of Middle Eastern studies. So, and I've been doing it a long time now. So it's been good.
This passion for people, and I'll jump to mention the article, the profile article that I recently did. It's interesting to see how, you know, for me, I was born into a family of small business owners, and I saw my parents really help people their entire career. You know, they made business decisions, but it was always about the people inside the business and the services that they to their clients. So any books that you recommend that you're reading today?
Oh, well, I mean, I read outside of HR. So I'm currently reading a book called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which is a beautiful novel by a first generation Vietnamese immigrant. And just, he's a poet, he's incredible. I'm also reading the Korn Ferry FYI book because it's the annual performance review time. But you know, I look for inspiration outside of kind of the typical HR stuff. But you know, back to what you were saying, I really resonated in your article that I just read on the HR engagement words, and how so many things can just be buzzwords like employee engagement. But what does that mean? You know, going beyond that. And that's where I've really kind of looked in HR on like, how do we go beyond the buzzwords and really connect and see what drives individuals and drives people and kind of connect to that. And I think you've been doing that at CRI.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe tell me, we'll go both ways, but tell me a little bit about what you've been
Why don't we in that topic for a little bit? Why don't you maybe share a little bit about the initiatives or some of the processes that you have established in your organization to really help employees feel like an important part of their organization?
That's great. So one of the things that we found is community makes a big deal to employees. Like they want to work for a company that is doing good and making a difference, and taking care of not only the community within, but also the community without. And so we've done a number of initiatives over the last year on really saying, what are we doing to connect? We recently partnered with Water for People, which is making a huge difference. We also partner with the Chemical Education Foundation, which trains young people on the STEM careers, and kind of encourages particularly young women on getting into careers in chemistry because it connects to our business. And so those external partnerships have been really important. And we added this year a volunteer program where we will reimburse employees for up to 2 days of volunteering a year.
Wow.
So anything that they're passionate about, you want to volunteer in your child's school, you want to go do a team habitat build, what matters to you and your community, we want to support it. And I think that's resonated and really engaged employees. We also recently created an actual nonprofit, which we call the Brenntag Solidarity Fund, where 100% of the financial support that goes into it goes back to employees that experience a disaster. And so what we were finding is there'd be a hurricane or a tornado, or there'd be something, and employees were doing these GoFundMe accounts, right? Like, hey, help Donovan, he's experienced this fire or whatever it was. And we were seeing all these and we're like, why can't we do that as a company and create something where employees give to each other? So I would say that community piece is one of the big pieces that really has been an unlocker for engagement for our employees.
That's outstanding. And I really like the words that you use. You said finding their passion and connecting them in that they really value. I think the external factor on that community service that you're doing, it's phenomenal. We're taking a similar approach. I will say that, internally for us, it's doing something similar and really linking strengths and passion of the individual to programs that we have developed internally to really give them the opportunity to use their strengths and obviously link it to company goals and objectives, but always with them on mind. You have to think about employees' perspective, not so much the organization's perspective, to really drive that engagement and passion of the individual. So thank you for sharing that. That was very
interesting. No, that's good. They spend so much time at work, and it's so easy to get into that work-life balance where it's like, okay, you're at work and then you're home. And the reality is it all kind of overlaps. And so how do we touch into those passions and what matters most to employees? I think that's important for us as companies to do. So
I love that. I'm sure you've heard of the concept work-life integration more than work-life.
Love it. I love that because that's what it is. And how do we create an environment, especially post-pandemic, right? Where people have been working from home. A lot of employees have been working from home, and they don't want to just go back to the office, but they do want to have an integrated experience which supports them at both their personal life and professional life. So
great. Well, listen, given your background, it may be easy to think that you were built to lead a global team. What would you say is the keys to leading an international organization?
I mean, I think to leading an international, that's a good question. It's easy to just put, so I'm American, grew up in the United States, and it's so easy to just kind of wear that US centric hat. And globally, every country is different. It's a unique culture. It's, this week I'll be in Mexico City and Bogota, Colombia, and every single country has the unique kind of culture. And so I think understanding it, I would say for me, it's always been curious. So the first time I started working in China, I, got a book on doing HR in China. And so being curious, really listening, I think is key. I remember the first time in China, one of my colleagues said, "Oh, we don't tip." And I was insisting on still giving a tip. And the waitress or server chased me down afterward. She was appalled that I left money on the table. Wow. And I was like, oh, okay. I really have to listen. I really, I was told, hey, we don't take tips here. And I was like feeling guilty, my American way, and left a tip anyway. And so, but then also not accept the status quo. So sometimes I'll hear, recently had a conversation regarding Guatemala, and they were like, well, this is how it's always done. And I'm like, well, why? Let's, so be curious, listen, but also don't just necessarily accept it. And when we went into China in Mars, we opened an M&M store in Shanghai, and I was told, well, no one works part-time. Everybody is full-time. You go to college, you graduate, you then go into jobs, so you will not be able to have part-timers. And you know, I spent a lot of time talking to Starbucks China, and they said everybody told us the same thing. You can do part-time. And we actually did. We had 40% of our employees part-time, and everybody was surprised. So I think it's a balance of be curious, ask questions, really listen, but then also don't just immediately accept the status quo. Dig into, you know, could we do this a little differently?
I love that, and I think that's great advice and a great segue to my next question. And I'm going to pivot to the topic of HR as a function. You know,
okay.
In a day and age where HR has become a key to company growth, what would be your advice to organizations who are looking to unify parts of their organization that may still have this legacy mindset about HR's role in their business?
Well, I could ask you this question and I'll answer it, so I won't try to switch the interview, but I know you're a COO and a CHRO, and
Correct.
I mean, what is the perfect way to integrate it? Because you're running the business and you're running the people side. And I think that is, for me, a real strong key, which is that they shouldn't really be separate. And so you do have this mindset, well, that's the role of HR. HR's, whatever it is, old mindset, legacy, you know, administrative, or the party planners, or they're just, you know, they are something else. And what I've found is, no, we are part of the business, and you just operate that way. I had a CFO who was used to being the only co-pilot in the room. And I showed up and was in every single management meeting and leadership meeting and every single strategy. And one time he just pulled me aside and was like, we've never had HR and all these things. I don't understand why. And I said, well, because you are the co-pilot for strategy and the business and finances, and all of that is critical. I would never imagine having strategy meetings without you. But people are integrated in everything, and the employee experience is so critical. And people, have you heard of the service profit chain? But people are tied directly to profit. And we had a great open conversation, but I think integrating those two pieces are key. And you just have to kind of blow up that legacy mindset by just operating that way, where you just don't accept anything else. And I think you probably do that wearing the two hats automatically.
No doubt. And just to add a little bit of context to my response, you know, at CRI, we've gone through a series of acquisitions over the last several years. So it's been quite a daunting task to really bring these organizations together. But if I had to choose one word to describe the work that we've done, is inclusivity. And to your point earlier, it's really taking the time to listen to the needs of the business, who obviously it's communicated through many and multiple leaders across the organization. So it's not just thinking that, you know, all financial decisions need to be made by our CFO. It's really creating projects and creating the space for people to feel comfortable to speak their minds and really tell us what we need to do as an organization. You know, one of the things that I learned earlier in my career is to never stop listening to the people who are closer to the client. So we've made it a really
great
point in our business to facilitate that environment for our associates, to where they feel freely and comfortable to tell us, hey, here are a few things that we need to fix. Here are a few problems that we need to address. And we commit to always circling back and giving them updates about the feedback that they provide. From my experience, you know, when you create that environment and you start getting feedback, the worst thing that you can do is never act on it. So we make it a point to always go back and provide updates to our team about
that's so good. That's so good.
And it may sound cliche, but we really believe in listening, to your point, to our frontline employees and also our
Mhm.
clients. The clients at the end of the day are the end users of the services or products that we provide. So they'll tell us what they like. They'll tell us what we need to
Mhm.
fix and what we need to address in terms of just changing some of our internal processes and procedures. Um, but in summary, I will say just being inclusive of the entire organization across all the different levels of the organization. It's been a strategy that we have used, and we've seen good results out of that.
That's great, Carlos. Two things that you said in there that just resonated with me so much. And the first one is like listening to the clients too, because in HR, it's so easy to be so focused on our inside the company.
True.
And not ever think about the customer. And so I think that's coming natural to you because you're a COO as well. And so you're thinking of the customers. But I think HR, we to really go to the next step, we really have to say, okay, what are the customers saying? And how do we create an environment where our employees are really connecting with that, right? And so sometimes it's taking that next step in HR and really going to the customer themselves. So it really resonated with me. So you said something else and it just flew out of my mind, but I really like that.
Awesome. Well, Donovan, without a doubt, throughout your career, you've created a ton of opportunities for leadership and in leadership.
Mhm.
What kinds of continuing education and leadership development have you found successful for both yourself and others in the
Mhm.
organization?
So the first thing is, so in every organization I've been, I've said we need a core leadership program. So leadership does not need to be proven out. We know, there's been many books on leadership and difference between leaders and managers. And so, having a leadership program, which is for every single employee that leads is critical. So one of the first things I did at Brenntag was say, hey, let's create, we call it the Catalyst Leadership Program. Let's create a leadership program for every line manager. And I had some pushback at the time. And at this point, we've had 900 leaders go through it, and it's been extremely successful, one of the most successful programs we've had. But at the pushback at the time was, well, shouldn't this be high performance managers, or shouldn't we nominate, or what is your process for selecting them? And I'm like, I want them all to go. I want every single leader, because we're talking about how do you lead by our values? How do you create a high performing team? How do you engage employees? How do you coach? How do you give feedback? These are core leadership things, and every single employee deserves to have a good leader.
No doubt.
I mean, and so that's the first thing I did to kind of create that. We have put in some curated kind of high potential programs for early career, mid-career. We looked at kind of talent pools, early career, mid-career, and senior leaders to be more tied into kind of what do they need at their stage in the journey, but that overall kind of leadership program has been the key. Myself, I've been doing this a long time. I find smaller curated groups. So I'm part of a group called Summit, which it brings in people from every different walk in life, and has amazing sessions. And then I work with a number of kind of trade association groups. And then even SHRM's executive network, I find some great development in there. So those are some of the things.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And, I appreciate the work that you're doing around your leadership developmental program. I think, just off of the feedback that I've heard in the field of HR throughout the years, one piece of feedback that's always at the top of the list is talent development, and
Yeah.
the employees of any organization will always look for opportunities to advance their careers. So the fact that you've taken the time to develop
Mhm.
a comprehensive program to address that need, I think it's fantastic. And then I
Yeah.
also think businesses have to start preparing for, what's coming, right? Like the uh, baby boomers are about to start
Yeah.
getting into retirement. I'm sure you've read articles that talk about how in the next 10 years there's going to be a huge need for talent development and succession planning. So it sounds like you're on the right track to be able to address those challenges.
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, the shift, I think our average age is like 49. But we have so many people in their 50s and 60s who will be retiring, and the opportunity from a succession planning standpoint for young people is incredible at companies like CRI and Brenntag. And so making sure they see it is important. There's nothing worse than losing a strong leader and they're like, well, there was some great opportunities at this other company. And you're like, what did we do wrong? Because there's so many opportunities here. So I think a lot of it is that career pathing as well, and really painting the picture for employees that, hey, we have a lot of opportunities, and over the next 10 years, all of these senior roles are going to open up, and we want to prepare you for that.
That's great. And thanks again for sharing your own personal strategy as it relates to development. Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Wrote a couple of things down for myself.
I've been taking notes on your comments the whole time, so I'm looking forward to getting a drink with you in Texas and continuing the conversation outside of this interview. So
I love that. The last question that I prepared for you: what advice do you try to impart to future HR and healthcare leaders who are young for years? Is there one piece of wisdom that you regularly share with future leaders?
For me, it's all about, I think I said it earlier, but it's be curious, ask questions. There was a Jewish philosopher, Maimonides, who used to ask his son every day when he came home from school, what questions did you ask? He didn't ask, what was his results on a test or how did he do? What questions did you ask? And I think for me, it's all about the questions. And I think that will really help you in your career. And then when you get kind of answers, what can you do to kind of make the difference, fill the gap? So many people that I've promoted over time have been doing the role. So, they're HR coordinator out of school, and then they just start picking up all these other things that are curious. They start coming up with suggestions, and pretty soon it's like they're operating as a specialist. And it's very easy to just give them that responsibility and that promotion and the title. And then pretty soon they're operating as an HR generalist and then a business partner, et cetera. And so rather than wait in your career for, what is my career path and what is my next step, just be curious, ask questions, get out, start making an impact, start doing the work, and the jobs and roles will kind of come and your path will really come together. And then the only other thing I would say is be kind of deliberate in your projects and development, and think about your career 5 years out. And a lot of times it'll be like, where do you want to go? And then what are the projects and the things that will really help you? And then take on those roles, because all of those will be part of your experience. And again, the role comes up that you want in a few years, you will have done the things to prepare yourself for them. So
that's great advice. Curiosity that leads to learning and being intentional. I love it.
Yeah.
Donovan, thank you once for your time. It's been a very insightful conversation. Really appreciate it.
Carlos, I love what you're doing. Loved reading the article and profile. It was absolutely fantastic. Love your pictures with those big crates. And so look forward to continuing the dialogue with you in the future.
I'll definitely show you our warehouse when you're here in Dallas, and we'll definitely get to connect and learn more from each other. Thank you once again for your time. And thank you again to the Healthcare Leader Association.